For centuries, humanity had been a member of the Galactic Council, a conglomerate of alien species spread across the stars. Earth was not the most advanced member, nor the most powerful, but they had earned their place through determination, innovation, and persistence. Yet, no matter how long humans had sat at the table, there was always an unspoken belief among the older species: humanity was still young, impulsive, not worthy of full respect. The ancient species viewed them as the new arrivals, not quite mature enough to play with the big leagues. This underlying sentiment simmered beneath every interaction, every treaty negotiation, and every council session. As the latest council meeting commenced, humanity's representative, General Kale Voss, sat quietly in his designated seat. The agenda was predictable: border disputes between distant systems, trade agreements, routine diplomatic affairs. To the untrained eye, it appeared like any other bureaucratic assembly. But those paying attention could sense the undercurrents of tension. Recently, the council had faced growing discord between its members. Minor squabbles had become common, old rivalries resurfaced, and trust had eroded. Humans, it seemed, had been at the center of much of this friction, not because of anything they had done, but simply because they existed. Earth's rapid technological advancements, coupled with its increasing influence, were viewed with suspicion by the older species, especially those who had long maintained a monopoly on power. They whispered among themselves that humanity's rise would disrupt the fragile balance of power, and some were not content to let that happen without interference. Voss listened to the ongoing debate regarding territorial disputes between two species from a distant sector, his face impassive, though his mind was elsewhere. Earth's situation had grown increasingly precarious. Reports from military intelligence had hinted at strange movements near human space, unauthorized incursions, probing attacks on the outer colonies, and unmarked vessels skirting the edges of Earth's territory. No one had claimed responsibility, and the Council, when approached about the issue, had been dismissive, brushing off the concerns as paranoia. But Voss knew better. Something was happening behind the scenes, something far more dangerous than petty border skirmishes. As the meeting dragged on, Voss caught a whispered exchange between two alien diplomats sitting a few rows ahead of him. Their native language was foreign, but he had spent enough time around the council to pick up the basics. They spoke of a plan coming to fruition soon, of Earth's influence finally being curtailed. His instincts screamed at him. These weren't just words of political strategy. There was intent behind them, a cold, calculated intent to remove humanity as a threat. He had heard enough. Voss excused himself from the session, leaving behind the political theater and the endless talks that accomplished nothing. Outside, his aide met him, face tense with the same worry that had been gnawing at the general's gut for weeks. "General," the aide said, "we've just received an urgent transmission from Earth. It's bad." The words confirmed what Voss had feared for months. There had been an attack, a coordinated, brutal strike on key cities across Earth's surface. The details were still coming in, but the preliminary reports were devastating. Civilian casualties were in the millions. Entire infrastructures wiped out in an instant. But the most damning part? The attackers had used cloaked ships, technology not available to humanity. Someone in the Council had supplied these weapons, and Earth was paying the price. The attack wasn't a random act of aggression or the result of some intergalactic misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attempt to cripple humanity's growing influence in the galaxy, to send a message that they were not welcome among the older, more established powers. Voss stood there, absorbing the weight of the news. Rage boiled inside him, but he couldn't let it consume him, not yet. There would be time for retribution, but first he needed answers. And he knew exactly where to get them. The attack came without warning. Earth's defense systems, though advanced, were caught off guard by the precision and brutality of the strike. It wasn't the work of pirates or some rogue faction. This was organized, methodical, and deliberate. The ships that appeared in orbit above Earth were cloaked, evading detection until the moment they unleashed their weapons. Major cities were targeted first, key population centers, government hubs, and industrial facilities wiped out in coordinated bursts of energy that scorched the surface and left nothing but ruins. In the chaos that followed, communications were scrambled, and Earth's military scrambled to respond. But the damage had been done. In the first hours, millions of lives were lost. Entire neighborhoods incinerated. Families vaporized in an instant. The heart of humanity was under siege, and there was no clear enemy to strike back against. General Kale Voss received the transmission while aboard a space station far from Earth's orbit. His heart sank as he watched the live feeds, showing burning cities and panicked citizens trying to flee what was left of their homes. His first instinct was to mobilize what forces they had, to strike back at the ships still hovering in Earth's atmosphere. But it quickly became clear that the attack wasn't meant to be sustained. The enemy wasn't looking to occupy or conquer, they were sending a message. The moment Earth's defense forces began to rally, the attackers disappeared, cloaking themselves and vanishing as quickly as they had come. The devastation left behind was undeniable. The human race, which had always prided itself on resilience and adaptability, was now bleeding from a wound that struck at the core of their existence. People had always expected that if Earth were ever attacked, it would be a war of invasion, something they could prepare for and fight back against. But this was different. This was annihilation from afar, a cold, detached assault meant to cripple humanity before they even had a chance to defend themselves. As the dust settled, Voss immediately convened with his military leaders. They assessed the situation with grim faces, trying to piece together who could be behind such an attack. They reviewed the technology used in the strike, and it became clear that this was no mere renegade action. The cloaking systems, the precision targeting, it all pointed to resources and knowledge far beyond the capabilities of any rogue faction. Someone had provided the attackers with the means to bypass Earth's defenses. And that someone had ties to the Galactic Council. Voss knew this wasn't just an act of war. It was a betrayal on a galactic scale. The Council had been aware of the growing hostility between certain factions and Earth, yet they had done nothing. Worse still, it was likely that some of the Council members had facilitated the attack, providing resources and cover for the strike, all under the guise of territorial disputes and diplomatic posturing. The implications were clear. The Council had underestimated humanity. They thought Earth could be dealt with, weakened, and forced back into submission. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had attacked humanity's home. As Voss looked at the footage of burning cities, he felt the weight of every life lost, every future destroyed in the blink of an eye. But he also felt something else: rage. Cold, burning rage. Humanity had faced extinction before, in its early days, battling plagues, natural disasters, and even each other. They had always survived. But this attack was different. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about retribution. The Galactic Council, in its arrogance, had assumed that humanity would fall quietly, that they would take the blow and retreat. But they had miscalculated. Earth was more than just a planet, it was the home of billions who would never stop fighting for their right to exist. Voss clenched his fists as he stood in the war room, surrounded by his commanders. He knew what had to happen next. This wasn't just about defense anymore. The attack had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Earth would rebuild, but they would also make sure that the ones responsible for this atrocity would pay the price. The Council members who had conspired in the shadows, those who had turned a blind eye while Earth burned, they would soon understand what it meant to provoke humanity. The next steps were clear. They would not wait for another strike. They would take the fight to the stars. General Kale Voss entered the council chamber with a purpose that radiated through the room. The usual hum of diplomatic conversation fell into an uneasy silence. The eyes of hundreds of alien species shifted towards him, each expression a mix of curiosity, unease, and in some cases, arrogance. The chamber, usually a place of drawn-out debates and bureaucratic rhetoric, now held a different energy. Voss's mere presence signaled that something had changed, dramatically. The council members had been expecting a debrief on Earth's situation, likely anticipating a plea for aid or at least some formal request for a diplomatic response. What they didn't expect was what came next. Voss didn't waste time with pleasantries or protocol. His voice cut through the air, crisp and devoid of any hint of weakness. "You attacked our home," he began, his words landing like a hammer blow in the silence. For a moment, no one moved. The council members seemed frozen, processing the accusation. Then, a ripple of discomfort spread through the room. Several representatives from the more powerful factions exchanged glances, their attempts at looking neutral faltering. A few, particularly those from the smaller species, looked genuinely surprised. Others, though, wore expressions that Voss recognized all too well: denial, calculation, guilt. One of the older council members, an alien from a highly influential species, shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. He wore the usual air of superiority, his voice steady as he responded. "General Voss, Earth's recent misfortune is regrettable, but to accuse the Galactic Council of direct involvement—" "I'm not accusing the entire council," Voss interrupted sharply. "But don't pretend none of you knew. I've seen the evidence. The cloaking technology, the precision strikes, it's far beyond the capabilities of any rogue faction or pirate group. We know those weapons came from someone with the resources of a council member." That statement shattered any remaining pretense of calm. Whispers broke out across the chamber, and Voss saw the ripple of fear and indignation spread among the seated members. Some were genuinely alarmed, while others were already formulating their defenses, ready to discredit his claims before they could gain traction. Another representative, from a race known for its diplomatic maneuvering, leaned forward. His voice was smooth but carried an edge. "General, these are serious accusations. The Galactic Council does not condone acts of aggression against its members. If there has been an attack, we must investigate thoroughly. But to imply complicity—" Voss cut him off again. "You're not hearing me. We don't need an investigation. We've already identified the ships. They belong to species aligned with Council members. Earth was attacked not because of a misunderstanding or an isolated incident. It was a planned, coordinated strike meant to cripple us. And you let it happen." His gaze swept across the chamber, locking eyes with several key figures. The truth was written on their faces, the flicker of fear and guilt barely concealed behind their diplomatic facades. "There's no need to pretend anymore," Voss continued, his voice steady but cold. "Some of you thought humanity was becoming too powerful, too influential. So you decided to weaken us before we could become a real threat. You supplied our enemies with the means to destroy our cities, kill millions of innocent civilians." He let the words hang in the air for a moment, the silence that followed almost deafening. For the first time, the full weight of his accusation had settled on the chamber. Voss could see the calculation in their eyes, the ones responsible scrambling to distance themselves from the act, while others were deciding which side of history they wanted to be on. A representative from a smaller, neutral species broke the silence. "If what you say is true, General, then this is an unprecedented betrayal. But what do you expect from this council now? Retribution? War?" Voss fixed his gaze on the speaker, his tone unwavering. "What I expect is accountability. Earth will not stand by and be treated as expendable. We will defend ourselves, and we will make sure those responsible for this attack face the consequences. If any member of this council is found to have aided or abetted this atrocity, you will not be shielded by your position here." The room shifted again, the atmosphere growing more charged by the second. The facade of diplomatic control was breaking. Several factions, those who had long been suspicious of Earth's growing strength, were now openly uncomfortable. They knew that Voss wasn't bluffing. Humanity had endured the unthinkable, and their response would not be timid. Voss took a step forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. "This isn't a negotiation. Earth has already begun preparations for what comes next. We won't be caught off guard again. And if this council continues to turn a blind eye to what's happening, then you've chosen your side." The message was clear. Humanity wasn't asking for permission or begging for support. They were warning the council that any further complicity or cowardice would be met with direct consequences. The lines had been drawn. The council could either stand with Earth or against it, but neutrality was no longer an option. As Voss turned to leave the chamber, the whispers of panic and calculation grew louder. He had thrown the gauntlet, and the Council now had to reckon with the reality that humanity would not sit idly by, waiting to be picked off. "You attacked our home," he repeated, quieter now but with the same fierce resolve. "And now, we'll make sure it never happens again." The chamber was in chaos after Voss's departure. The air buzzed with frantic conversations, the once calm council members now torn between fear and self-preservation. Some of the smaller factions were already starting to draft resolutions, hoping to distance themselves from any direct involvement in the attack. Others, more deeply complicit, were scrambling to form alliances to protect their positions. The room that once controlled the balance of power across the galaxy was unraveling, exposed by a single act of betrayal. Outside the chamber, Voss stood alone, staring out at the vastness of space. The weight of what lay ahead settled on his shoulders, but there was no hesitation. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, and now it would push back. He knew that the path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Earth would not let this attack go unanswered. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival, justice, and ensuring that humanity would never again be treated as expendable. In the days following the council session, Earth began to mobilize. The wounds from the attack were still fresh, the scars visible in every city that had been decimated, but there was no time to mourn. Humanity was a species built on resilience, forged in adversity, and it would rise from the ashes. Rebuilding had already started, but alongside it came preparations for war. The defense forces, now fully aware of the scale of the threat, were no longer acting reactively. They were preparing to strike. Voss knew that Earth couldn't fight this battle alone. Despite humanity's advancements, they lacked the sheer numbers and resources to take on the entire Council. But alliances had already begun to form. Several species, those who had remained neutral in the Council's power struggles, had reached out in quiet support. They had seen the writing on the wall: if Earth could be attacked and left defenseless, who would be next? These species weren't interested in joining a full-scale war, but they were willing to supply intelligence, resources, and technology to help humanity defend itself. For others, the choice was less about survival and more about opportunity. Humanity's willingness to stand against the Council had sparked something in them. There were those who had long resented the dominance of the older, more powerful species. They saw Earth's defiance as a chance to tip the scales, to realign the galactic order. These factions, though small in number, were crucial in bolstering Earth's efforts, providing the support necessary to counterbalance the larger, more established powers. The Council, meanwhile, was fractured. In the wake of Voss's accusations, the cracks in their unity had become chasms. Some factions, desperate to avoid conflict, were pushing for a diplomatic resolution, even offering reparations to Earth in the hopes of quelling the brewing storm. Others, particularly those responsible for supplying the weapons that had devastated Earth, were preparing for a fight. They had already made their choice, and they knew there was no turning back. The only option now was to destroy Earth before humanity could become a true threat. But Voss wasn't waiting for them to make the first move. The intelligence gathered from Earth's new allies pointed to key facilities used by the enemy factions, military outposts, weapons depots, and shipyards that could be crippled if struck swiftly and decisively. Humanity's first strikes would be surgical, targeted, designed to weaken their enemies before a larger conflict could escalate. It wasn't about wiping out entire species. It was about sending a message: Earth was no longer a passive player in the galaxy. And so, the war began, not with grand battles or massive fleets clashing in the void, but with precision strikes, covert operations, and calculated moves that slowly shifted the balance of power. The enemy factions, who had once believed humanity to be little more than an annoyance, were now forced to reckon with the full scope of Earth's capabilities. Voss led these operations with a cold efficiency, his anger tempered by a clear understanding of the stakes. As the months wore on, the galaxy began to change. The Council, once the unchallenged authority, had been shaken to its core. Trust among the member species was all but destroyed, and new alliances were being forged in the shadows. The war that had started with the attack on Earth was evolving into something much larger, a conflict that threatened to engulf the entire galactic order. But amidst the chaos, Earth remained steadfast. The destruction of their home had not broken them, it had only made them stronger. Every strike they made, every ally they gained, brought them closer to securing their place in the galaxy, not as a species to be pitted or ignored, but as a force to be reckoned with. And for General Kael'vas, there was a grim satisfaction in knowing that those who had thought they could erase humanity with a single blow were now scrambling for survival. The Galactic Council, once so sure of its dominance, was learning that Earth was no mere pawn in their games. It was a power in its own right, and anyone who underestimated it would pay the price. "You attacked our home," Voss had said. Now, with every passing day, those words echoed louder across the stars, a reminder to the galaxy that humanity would not be silenced, would not be broken. They would fight, they would rebuild, and they would ensure that Earth would never again face such betrayal. The path ahead was uncertain, and the war was far from over. But one thing was clear: the galaxy had underestimated humanity for the last time.